Howdy my totally two-wheeler gamers, and today we have one of my biggest ranking videos, one of my most requested ranking videos. Today we are ranking Grand Theft Auto games. Now Grand Theft Auto needs no introduction. You know it, your family knows it, your dog, your cat, your extended relatives probably know about it as well. Everybody knows what Grand Theft Auto is. What is there really left to say about the GTA series? It is the most successful open world series of games. It was genre defying. It was a pioneer for open world games, the most successful crime series of games. It's one of the most successful game series of all time. And the people just love GTA, whether it's the critics praising the hell out of it or it's the rabid, huge fan base of fans for GTA. Pretty much everybody that isn't a middle-aged mom looking out for their kid just, again, loves GTA. And people just love the series for basically everything, whether it's its open world shenanigans, the freedom that provides, the storylines, the characters, the memorable missions, or just some of the shit you can get into in these games, or now the online. People love Grand Theft Auto. And so now I have the uneasy task of ranking all of the Grand Theft Auto games from worst to best. In making this ranking, we're going to be looking at just about everything. How's the gameplay? How is it aged? How's the story, characters, music? Yeah, I'm looking at everything here. And again, this was not an easy task. And I know that a ton of people are going to disagree with me no matter what I put. Every game on this list is incredibly beloved, and almost all of them can be considered masterpieces in their own right. And everyone's going to have their own personal favorite or list or favorites. It's just incredibly subjective. So before you go after me that I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm a dumbass, let me know your list first. Over the years, I've just played every Grand Theft Auto, whether it was when it was new and I was just a teenager or when I got older. GTA has just always been there, and I've always made sure to play every game. Really, I've just been a lifelong fan and always will be. And I'm hoping one day that this list is outdated because Grand Theft Auto 6 actually does come out. We're also only going to be looking at one version of each game. I know some of these games have been re-released multiple times. GTA 5. Additionally, there's no bad GTA game. Some games are clearly better than others, but yeah, there's no bad GTA game. And so let's just get right into it. Like, share, sub, comment, all that good stuff. What do I think is the weakest in the Grand Theft Auto series? It should come as no surprise that at the bottom of the barrel we have Grand Theft Auto Advance by Digital Eclipse and published by Rockstar for the Game Boy Advance. While it's not a terrible game, or really all that bad of a game in its own right, when you compare all of the GTA games, yeah, it's pretty obvious it's pretty far behind. The game is like the first two Grand Theft Autos where it's from a top-down perspective, and of course with it being on the GBA, you gotta expect some compromises here. While it's not bad, it's very average or middling really at best. The story's alright in this game. It's a prequel to GTA 3 and takes place in Liberty City again. There's even some characters here from GTA 3 that make an appearance like 8-Ball, and that's cool, I guess. The story is pretty basic, and there's no cutscene since it's the GBA, it's just all text. Now when it comes to the actual gameplay, most of the game you really are just driving from one location to the other, or trying to escape like the cops. There is some on foot here, but the less said about the on foot, probably the better. A majority really is driving. The controls could be a lot better, as it does feel very unresponsive at times, especially in certain vehicles, and I mean, driving with the D-pad, it's going to take some time to get used to. And then when it comes to the presentation, it was just like, okay, the graphics are alright for the GBA, but it can get really stuttery, especially when you're driving at fast speeds, and that just adds to the unresponsiveness. The music is just really annoying. There is music in this game, but it does get pretty old pretty quickly as there are no radio channels. It just plays one track the whole time you're in a certain car, which, yeah, it gets annoying. Look, I cut this game some slack because it is on the GBA, and it does have some good elements to it, but coming back all these years later, it's really not that great. And these days, I don't recommend anybody try it out, as it's just way too dated for its own good. It's more dated than, like, the original GTA games. Speaking of, here we have the original GTA, put out all the way back in 1998 by DMA Design and published by Take-Two and eventually Rockstar Games. Now coming back to the original GTA all these years later, it is pretty crazy how Rockstar had a vision in mind, and really every GTA after would just build on top of this original vision. This game has pretty much everything you'd expect from a Grand Theft Auto game, it's just from a top-down perspective. It has you dropped into an open world where you can do whatever you want. There's a couple different open worlds, being Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas. You really can just free roam, do whatever you want, kill people, run people over, or just explore the map if you want to. And then of course you can take on missions, whether it's through the phone or through a vehicle. There is plenty of jobs to do here. Interestingly enough, this game is actually heavily point-based, as the goal for each area is to actually get so many points. You get points for pretty much everything, but the real way to get the points is by doing jobs. Something kind of funny to see is that this game actually has lives. Every level you have 5 lives, and if you lose them all, well, you're shit out of luck. So most of the game is doing these jobs, and most of the jobs are pretty simple. Usually it's just crash into someone, sell a car, kill someone, or get somewhere so fast. So most of the game is driving. The driving in this game is pretty alright. Sometimes the camera just goes absolutely nuts and zooms in and out, but for the most part, the driving is fine enough. The controls are nice, and the game has radio stations. And of course, as you commit crimes, eventually the police become more and more aware of your activities, and they'll start to hunt you down, eventually getting to the point where they will just do everything in their power to destroy you. But that's the typical Grand Theft Auto gameplay. There is also some on-foot gameplay, but like GTA Advance, the less said about this the better. I mean, it is better than GTA Advance's on-foot gameplay, but I've never thought that the on-foot gameplay was particularly strong in the first couple Grand Theft Auto games. But again, it is pretty impressive to see how Rockstar really laid the foundation for all the GTA games to come, and it's all here in the original game. The formula's there, the design is there. It's just very unrefined and a lot more simple than later games. There's also 2 expansions for it that I'm just throwing in here, London missions, and there's also a Game Boy Color version of this game, which, I mean, you think this game is already kind of dated, you look at that Game Boy Color version. So should you try GTA 1 in the modern day? If you really want to see where the series got started, go ahead and try it. Otherwise, you can pretty much skip it. Alright, and so here we have Grand Theft Auto 2, released by Rockstar in '99 and 2000 on the Dreamcast. I actually played the Dreamcast version, interestingly enough. Now, when it comes to Grand Theft Auto 2, it really does look at the original game and just kind of has more of the same, but it does build a little on top of it. The game still has that open world and gives you the freedom. It does incentivize you to do violent acts of nature though, as the game is very point driven. You need points to progress through the game. You get points for killing people, stealing cars, selling cars, or blowing stuff up, and of course getting the police killed. And of course, doing these actions will alert the police, especially killing them, will definitely alert the police and make them want to kill you, so you gotta try to stay alive and all that jazz. Then of course, there's a bunch of the missions that you can do. You get jobs from various crime syndicates, and these are what you'd expect: kill people, drive somewhere really fast, run someone over, destroy stuff. And something introduced in GTA 2 is the idea of loyalty and respect. Doing missions for certain crime syndicates gets you more respect, meaning the gang will give you harder and tougher missions, and you'll become loyal with them. They'll trust you more, they'll respect you more, but on the flip side, other gangs will see that you're loyal to a certain gang and might even be hostile towards you because of that. And it can get to a point where you can actually be locked out of other gangs' missions because you're so loyal to a certain gang, which is a cool little aspect. The setting of GTA 2 is really weird. It's really different from the other games. The setting is a retro-futuristic metropolis referred to only as Anywhere USA, and it's divided into 3 different districts that you'll go through as you progress through the game. The time period is like not even specified. It doesn't really make any sense. Like, sometimes I think it takes place around 1999, and sometimes I got no idea. I think it's in like the future. Very unique setting for the Grand Theft Auto series. But yeah, the core gameplay is very similar to the original GTA. If you like the original GTA, you'll love GTA 2, as it's kind of just more of the same. It is a bit improved. The radio stations are pretty good. The game looks a little better. The controls are better. But yeah, it's really the same kind of gameplay loop here. I still don't really know if I recommend this. I mean, if you want GTA on Dreamcast, you got it here, but there's also a Game Boy Color port, and we're not going to talk about that. Is it worth playing nowadays? Probably not. Alright, and so here we have GTA Chinatown Wars, released in 2009, developed primarily by Rockstar Leeds. It was released for the DS, the PSP, and eventually the iPhone. With the game being made primarily with the DS in mind, it does have some key differences between the other Grand Theft Auto games. It's much more like the first 2 GTA games, where it is from a top-down perspective, but it has a lot of the modern elements from later GTA games. The game has a totally unique presentation, as it is cel-shaded and looks much more like a comic book, a first and only time the series has done this. However, the PSP version does not have this. I remember playing this game many years ago on my DS, on my R4, and then eventually picking it up on my iPhone when I was younger as well. And I remember being decently impressed with it. The game does utilize some of the DS's gimmicky elements, such as the touchscreen and blowing into the mic, but for the most part, you've got a real full-scale Grand Theft Auto game here. It's just top-down. It takes place in GTA 4's Liberty City, but it's obviously a lot more scaled back and smaller, and of course some compromises are going to be made here to the map and the world and the gameplay since it's on the DS, but again, I think that this is actually a pretty decent to good attempt at a Grand Theft Auto game on like the DS. The story is actually pretty unique too. You play as Huang Li, he's a Triad member, and you actually do a lot of drug selling in this game. And it goes over his struggles, especially with being in the Triad. I think it's actually pretty unique, especially for the GTA series, and it's honestly become kinda underrated. But yeah, when it comes to the gameplay, what you've got here is a typical GTA game. You've got a fully explorable open world where you take on missions and you can sell drugs. A lot of the missions are your standard GTA affair, and yeah, while it is from a top-down perspective, so it doesn't, control as nice or as engaging as, say, some of the other games, it's still actually pretty good. And I think the whole drug dealing aspect of the game is unique for the series, and it throws in a little wrinkle in there for the gameplay. I think that this is actually a pretty good game. It turns out that this is actually the highest rated DS game of all time, interestingly enough, and well, I don't know about that. I think that it is still actually good, and it is worth playing. I don't really love the top-down GTA games, but if you're going to play any of the top-down GTA games, this is the only one that I think is really worth playing nowadays. Okay, so here we got GTA Liberty City Stories, initially released for the PSP in 2005, but then put on the PS2 a year later. Now, Liberty City Stories was a big deal for the time as it was the first 3D GTA title to be released for handheld devices. All we had before was GTA Advance and the ports of GTA 1 and 2 on Game Boy. The game is a prequel to Grand Theft Auto 3 using the same setting, that being Liberty City. It takes place in 1998 and follows mobster Tony Cipriani, a character who is in GTA 3. And it's about Tony rising to power and becoming the mob boss that he is in GTA 3. The story is pretty decent in this game. I'm not going to act like it's amazing or these characters are all that memorable or it isn't, predictable, but it is actually pretty alright. Now when it comes to the gameplay, it really does play like the GTA games from the mid-2000s. It feels the most probably like Grand Theft Auto 3 since, it is the same city. And if you like the gameplay of the Grand Theft Auto games from the mid-2000s, as most people do, then yeah, you'll like the gameplay here. It does feel a little scaled back from, say, San Andreas, which this game came out after, such as you cannot swim at all. You'll just die if you fall in the water, but the game does have some indoor environments. GTA 3 did not have that, really. But when it comes to the missions, it definitely does feel a bit scaled back from San Andreas. Again, it was made for the PSP, and most of the missions are your standard GTA crime affair. There's nothing really here that stood out all that much to me. Most of them are pretty fine to good. There wasn't really any horrible ones, at least. When it comes to the controls, they feel just as good as the other PS2 GTA games. I've only ever played this game on PS2, so I only know that version. It feels fine, the cars control nice, and the shooting is pretty decent. Sadly, despite being pretty decent to good, I would say that Liberty City Stories is a bit unmemorable. It just doesn't have a ton going for it, and there's a reason most people don't even really talk about it nowadays. I mean, at least the radio stations were decent. It also doesn't have length on its side. It's maybe like 6 or 7 hours. If you explore everything, maybe you can add a couple more hours at most, but yeah, it's not that big either. Is it worth playing nowadays? Yeah, it's pretty alright still. From one handheld game to another, here we have GTA Vice City Stories released on the PSP in 06 and again on the PS2 in 07. Vice City Stories would be the last of the original GTA 3D series. After this we would get GTA 4, which changed to a much more realistic style. And like Liberty City Stories, this is a prequel, this time to Vice City Stories, and you follow Vance, a minor character in the original game. His brother, though, Lance, would be a much more integral character to Vice City. The story here is actually pretty decent. It's about the brothers conflicting with rival gangs, drug lords, and really just trying to, rise up in the criminal world. I think this game is able to capture Vice City's vibes really well. I love Vice City's vibes and characters, and I think that this game really does build off of that. It's not as good as Vice City, obviously, when it comes to the characters, world, story, and all that, but it still is pretty decent, and they actually do have something here. And I liked it. This game is much more in line with San Andreas in terms of improvements, like you can swim, you can fly airplanes, you can really interact with every type of vehicle that you could in San Andreas. And when it comes to the controls, at least on the PS2 version, this might be the best of all the GTA PS2 games. It actually does feel pretty nice, it is smooth for the most part, and the combat does not feel anywhere near as clunky. I'm specifically referring to the hand-to-hand combat, which has been, quote, overhauled, as the developer said, and it does actually feel pretty alright. And then the game has absolutely what you expect. You can free roam around a pretty decently sized Vice City that does feel different from the original Vice City. You can do the main missions, or you can buy properties and expand your businesses like how Vice City did. I like the whole business thing to GTA. I've always thought that this is pretty neat. It is a bit expanded on here, and some of the side missions are actually pretty decent here. It's not all just throwaway filler. I like the whole beach patrol thing and where you would have to deal with these bikers on the beach, which was pretty funny. But in general, the side missions were actually pretty decent. The game is a bit longer than Liberty City Stories, and I thought that the campaign was just a bit more fulfilling. There's actually some memorable missions here in the main campaign, like the one with Phil Collins. I think everything to do with Phil Collins was actually pretty great here. I did like the campaign for the most part. I think that this is a pretty solid GTA game. When comparing all the GTA games, yeah, it is a little lower on the list, but it still is a pretty good game for the most part, and you should probably try it out if you like GTA. Alright, so here I got a double whammy for you. I got both the GTA 4 expansions here, both of them released in 2009 for the 360, and we have The Lost and the Damned and the Ballad of Gay Tony. Originally, I did have these two as separate entries, but no matter how I did this list, these two entries were always right next to each other, so I thought, might as well just put them together. Now, both these expansions are very similar in a number of different ways. Both of them take place in Liberty City. It uses the same map as GTA 4. Both of them take place during GTA 4, and both of them involve characters that were just side characters in GTA 4, but are obviously the protagonists for their own stories. And both expansions use GTA 4's gameplay, so that really heavy kind of underwater feeling that you get while driving around is very present here that I'm not a big fan of, and the shooting does feel very weighted and is very cover oriented, but it's still pretty good. Despite all those similarities, the stories are actually very different from each other. The Lost and the Damned is about Johnny Klebitz, who is the vice president of the Liberty City chapter of the Lost MC, a motorcycle club, and it's about Johnny's efforts to keep the chapter running while dealing with tons of internal conflicts, gang warfare, drug running, and all sorts of wonderful things. The Ballad of Gay Tony, it follows Luis Fernando Lopez, a former drug dealer turned bodyguard and best friend of Anthony Gay Tony Prince, a nightclub owner and high-status socialite in Liberty City. And the story really is about them staying afloat and keeping the club running. Both stories are actually pretty great. They both use GTA 4's excellent storytelling, and I think they both tell really good stories, and they have some of the strongest characters and writing that the series has ever seen. They also do shed some light on some of the other aspects of GTA 4's missions. Now, when it comes to which expansion I like more, I definitely like the Ballad of Gay Tony more. I like its story and characters more. I think Lost and the Damned has a pretty good story, and it does have some good missions to it. I just think Ballad of Gay Tony has better missions, better characters, better writing, and I just found it a little bit more enjoyable. But that doesn't discount The Lost and the Damned at all. I think both of them are some of the best expansions or DLCs made for any game. Like, they're both great. They're both at least 4 or 5 hours long. They, again, have a pretty good story. They have some pretty good characters, and the gameplay is pretty good still. Both of these expansions added a ton of vehicles and weapons and modes to the multiplayer, so they really did add more to GTA 4. They didn't just reuse all of GTA 4's stuff. Really, every expansion or DLC should strive to be as good as these GTA 4 expansions because they're just really good expansions. Like, if every expansion or DLC was this good, we'd be in a lot better world. World hunger would probably be solved. Or maybe I would have gotten my Tree 50 from the Loch Ness Monster. Either way, it's totally worth playing. If you like GTA, totally play these. If you like open worlds, play them. They're some of the best expansions ever. It's pretty hard to get this without GTA 4 at this point, so just buy it all together. It's totally worth it. And so here we have the game that really brought GTA into the limelight, that just kind of made it explode with popularity. Grand Theft Auto 3, released in 2001. Now, you don't need me to tell you how GTA 3 really revolutionized gaming, especially in the 2000s, and how it really just changed the game. It wasn't the first open world game by any stretch of the imagination, but it really popularized and pioneered the genre. And there was a reason why we had so many open world crime based games after GTA 3 came out. It's because it just did that much for gaming. People were just blown away with the freedom. They loved the missions, the characters, the stories, and just what kind of nonsense you could get into in this game. And of course, the game garnered a lot of attention for its violence and its drugs and its hookers and stealing cars and all that stuff. But when you look past all of that, you have a pretty great game here, actually. Now, has the game aged? Of course the game has aged. It hasn't aged all that remarkably, but what you still have here is a more than fine enough playable experience in modern day. It still has everything that you're looking for in a GTA game, just on a smaller scale compared to some of the later titles. You've still got a sprawling open world with a ton of collectibles, side missions, and then you have all of the main missions, the storyline of GTA 3. The story follows Claude, a silent protagonist who is betrayed and left for dead by his girlfriend when they're robbing a place. And it really leads him on a quest for revenge that leads him to become entangled in a world of crime, drugs, gang warfare, and just straight up corruption. The story is actually pretty good in this game, especially compared to GTA 1 and 2. It's a lot more fleshed out. There's really like characters here with personalities. Are they over the top? Of course they're over the top, but they're still pretty solid. The writing is decent enough. Yeah, it is a bit more basic than the other GTA games and your main character doesn't really have a personality, but I still think it is pretty good. It really gets the job done and sets the tone for all the missions, so I think it's good in that aspect. Is it going to win any awards? No, of course not, but it's not trying to either. Now, the biggest change that GTA 3 has over its predecessors is that it's a fully explorable 3D world. It's now in a third-person perspective rather than the top-down flat perspective, and everything is, again, in a third-person view. The progression has changed completely as well. The whole point system from 1 and 2 are just gone. Now you can explore to your heart's content. There's a bunch to see, a bunch to do, and you can just do the main missions whenever you want. There's no lives either. And all of these missions are a hell of a lot more interesting and memorable than anything GTA 1 and 2 had. Sure, they aren't all that different from what you did in those games. You're killing people, you're running people over, you're stealing cars, you're trying to go somewhere fast. But these missions are just done so much better. They're much more engrossing, they have interesting points to them, they've actually got some real challenge to them, especially towards the end of the game. They're going to kick your ass, and I found most of them genuinely fun. Sure, there are some stinkers here, and in fact there's actually a lot of stinkers here all these years later. But so many of these missions are just so memorable, like the car bomb mission. I love this mission, and the amount of different ways you can do it, it's pretty great actually. Now, it's not all peaches and rosy here. This game has aged in a number of ways that make it difficult to come back to. The controls could definitely use some work. They take some time to get used to. They're very stiff, clunky, and shooting feels kind of terrible for the most part. Hand to hand is pretty awful, but I'm not going to say any of it's like awful. You can get used to it and you can get pretty decent with it. I know I did, especially back in the day. At least the driving is actually pretty solid. It still feels really nice and it is smooth. The driving is very arcade. It doesn't go for a realistic vibe here, and I actually still think it holds up really well. Most of the game you are driving, so that's good at least. You also can't swim, which is really annoying, especially for any missions on a boat. But yeah, don't be surprised if you have a number of deaths because you're fighting the awkward controls. Speaking of death, this game is not messing around. They have no problem kicking your ass. This game actually is pretty challenging, and if you don't use cheats, you're going to be on some of these missions a long time. But despite that, you have an absolutely legendary game here with a great open world, a nice storyline, some fun missions, and you can just have a great time playing GTA 3, whether it's 2001 or it's 2021, you're going to have a good time. And it's totally worth checking out the original version, I might add, not that shitty re-release from last year. Alright, and so here we have Grand Theft Auto 4, released in 2008 for everything at the time. Now, I know a lot of people really love GTA 4, and it might even be their favorite GTA, and they might be surprised with where I have it on this list, but compared with the other games on this list, I think it's not as good. It's still a fantastic game though. Now, GTA 4 really brought GTA into the HD era, and it changed a number of things for the formula. I'd say the two biggest changes that GTA 4 brought to the formula was that they made it a lot more realistic and heavy, and they actually have a much heavier emphasis on the story and the characters. Now, in the other GTA games, there were a lot of good characters and there was some good writing and some good story, but GTA 4 really hones in on the story, the writing, and its characters to create maybe the strongest cast of characters that the series has ever seen. The story is about Eastern European war veteran Niko Bellic and his attempts to escape his past. He leaves his country and comes to America to live the American dream, as his cousin Roman has said that he's living large in Liberty City. He shows up to find out that Roman is not indeed. And it sees Niko struggling with the idea of the American dream and of course falling into some bad shit and getting involved in some even worse shit. I think Niko Bellic is a really strong character, and I think that his whole character arc in GTA 4 is actually pretty great. The other characters in GTA 4 are also equally great. Roman, his annoying cousin, despite being annoying, is also pretty great, and the people that give you missions in this game, yeah, they're really memorable, and I think the story as a whole is probably the strongest aspect of GTA 4. It was the strongest story by far at the time for GTA games. And if someone told me that it was their favorite or they thought it was the best story that Grand Theft Auto ever told, I would totally believe it because I could see it. Now, while I absolutely love the story of GTA 4, when it comes to the gameplay, I don't love it as much. Sure, the formula is generally the same. You have a giant, amazing open world to explore with a ton to see, side missions to do, and a nice storyline to go through. There have been some changes to the overall feel of the game that I'm not a fan of. I know some people really like how this game feels, but I just never have been a fan. Whether I played it back almost like 10 years ago or even nowadays, I'm just like, it's just not the best feel for me. See, this game has a very heavy feel to it. Everything feels a lot more weighted and just kind of rooted in reality. The older GTA games were a lot more arcade and just kind of crazy by comparison. First off, the driving I just feel is nowhere near as great as it was in the older games. It's a lot heavier, the cars feel kind of underwater, and turning in them just feels very slow. The game feels incredibly sluggish when you're driving around. You can get some good speed here, I'm not saying that, and you can actually go pretty fast, but it just doesn't feel that great to me. On foot, it's a pretty similar situation. You move very slow, it feels a bit sluggish and like you're moving underwater. The game introduces a cover system. It's a very good cover system actually, where you can take cover behind basically everything, and the shooting feels a lot more weighted and realistic. It's very heavy and a lot of the shots matter. And again, I know some people really like the realistic tone and feel of the game. It's just not my preference. When it comes to the presentation, this game looked freaking amazing for 2008, but you know what? It can look even more amazing if it didn't have this ugly ass filter on it. Yeah, it has some like 2008 Instagram filter on it, and I do not like this filter at all. There's mods on the PC version that get rid of it, and I think this game looks way better. And then we have the radio stations, which maybe it's just me and my preferences, but I do not like the music in this game. I just never thought it was all that great. Liberty Rock was okay, but the other stations I was just like, wow, this isn't great. Now I get it, everything I just talked about is subjective, and I'm probably making it sound like I don't love the game. Well, despite my subjective issues with it, I don't think you can deny that the game has some superb missions. It has a ton of memorable set pieces, it has a ton of depth to it. Nico's very customizable, you can get a girlfriend, you talk to people on the phone. I really do actually think the gameplay is still really good. It's just not my preference for GTA. But I still have a ton of great memories with GTA 4, playing it back in the day, really liking the story, and actually really liking the multiplayer. I have a lot of fun memories in the multiplayer. It was really a good time. It's a shame you can't really go online with it anymore. I know I just talked shit about it for 2 minutes, but I still think that this is a great game that is totally worth playing if you like GTA open world games, or if you somehow haven't played it at this point. Alright, and so here we have GTA Vice City, released originally in 2002, a year after Grand Theft Auto 3, and they really looked at GTA 3 and its gameplay and its story and thought, how do we improve on this? How do we make it better? We set it in the 80s, we set it in Florida, and we just kind of expand the gameplay. And with that, I think they created a fantastic game. Vice City has gone on to be one of the fan favorites of the series, and a lot of people's favorite like PS2 game of all time, and with good reason. Vice City is just a fantastic game. The game is set in 1986 in the fictional Vice City, based on Miami and Miami Beach. It's about Tommy Vercetti and his rise to power after being released from prison and becoming caught up in an ambush drug deal. While he seeks out those responsible, he slowly actually builds up a criminal empire, taking power from other criminal organizations throughout the city. Tommy is a great character. He's one of the best protagonists of any open world game, let alone the GTA games. The previous protagonist, Claude, really didn't have a personality. He didn't have much going for him. Tommy is the exact opposite. He has a ton of personality and character and charm and wit. He's actually really well written, and there's a lot to him. He doesn't change a ton throughout the game, but you really actually root for this guy. But he isn't the only good character in the game. There's my man Lance, he's pretty good, and then there's a bunch of other quirky, memorable characters that give you missions throughout the game. I think the story of Vice City is just great. Sure, is it a little simple and is it based off Scarface to an extent? Of course, but it's still pretty great, and it still does tell an interesting story that makes you really, again, root for this guy and you want to see what happens. Now, while the core gameplay is still very similar to GTA 3, you have a giant open world to explore and you do a lot of driving and getting into some shootouts, the vibes and the missions are just totally different from GTA 3. Like, Vice City has some of the best vibes you'll find in any PS2 game. You really do feel like you're in like Miami Beach. The open world is just completely different from really any other GTA game. There's so much water, there's beach, there's just a bunch to this world. There's a bunch to see, a bunch to explore, and there's a bunch of nooks and crannies. In GTA 3, you couldn't really go in any buildings. In Vice City, you can. And then speaking of buildings, there's actually a whole property system here. Throughout the game, you'll actually acquire a ton of money, and you'll be able to buy businesses. And by buying these businesses, you'll be able to build up Tommy's enterprises. But of course, you're going to have people go after you if you become, a powerful figure. This game has a ton of different gangs in it, and they are way more interesting than GTA 3's gangs. And of course, you're going to get into fights with them. The combat and controls feel a lot better than GTA 3's, especially when it comes to the gunplay. The lock-on is quite a bit better. It's a lot smoother. It actually locks onto what you want. The weapons feel a lot better. They added a bunch of new weapons here. The melee, though, yeah, the melee's still ass, but the controls feel a bit better. You still can't swim, so that sucks. And the driving feels pretty much untouched. A lot of the vehicles feel the same, and the driving, again, still pretty arcade, but it is still good. And then when it comes to the missions, oh, it's so much better in GTA 3. They're a lot more memorable, there's a lot of variety, and it's a lot more than the simple kill someone, run someone over, or chase someone down. There's a ton of different missions here. There's heists, and you get to even control some RC planes and helicopters and things like that. These are terrible, but the ratio of good to bad missions is pretty good. Most of the missions are pretty great, and only a couple of them have aged poorly. This game has actually aged incredibly well in just about every aspect. Sure, it does look a bit blocky, but I mean, you can get over that. And it doesn't matter how old this game is, it's going to have one of the best soundtracks to any video game. It is arguably the best radio stations of any Grand Theft Auto game, and it's one of my favorite soundtracks to any game. Like, it is just fantastic. And the controls, like I mentioned, they've actually aged pretty decently. And yeah, it's just a fantastic game and totally worth playing no matter who you really are. If you like video games, it's, again, totally worth playing. Play the original version, don't play that awful remaster either.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Alright, it was really hard for me to choose between these two, but in the number 2 spot I got GTA San Andreas, released in 2004. So with San Andreas, I can say the same thing about it that I said about Vice City. They look at the previous game and go, how do we make this even better? And you know what they did? They made just a fantastic game and one of my favorite games of all time. The game is about my man CJ Carl Johnson, who returns home following his mother's murder and is drawn back into his former gang and a life of crime while clashing with very corrupt authorities and just some really evil people. Carl's journey takes him across the fictional US state of San Andreas, which is the setting here. It's based on basically California and Nevada, and it has 3 major cities: Los Santos, which is LA, San Fierro, San Francisco, and Las Venturas, Las Vegas. I love the characters and the setting. I live in California myself. I've been to LA, I live near San Francisco, and I've been to Vegas a bunch, so you knew I was gonna love the setting like immediately. I love all 3 of these cities. They're all great, and this game is so much bigger than how Vice City was. Like, it is way bigger, and there's way more to see and do. And the characters really are just stuff of legends at this point. Like, they're all really great. CJ is a great protagonist, but it's not just him. The other characters are equally as good, like Big Smoke.
I have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip, a number 7.
And something I really like about San Andreas' story is that it has really strong antagonists. Like Tenpenny, I really hate Tenpenny, and I think that it has some of the best antagonists in the whole series. Okay, aside from the really awesome story, characters, and setting, we got a pretty great game here. It really does feel very similar to Vice City, but they expand on it in a number of ways. First off, the controls are a little bit better and smoother than Vice City's. The lock-on is even better than it was before. The gunplay is actually pretty satisfying, and the melee combat, well, it's not as awful as before. There's a ton of different weapons to use here, a lot of them being new to the series, and again, it all does feel very nice. It feels really snappy, and it does feel pretty arcade for the most part. Driving feels just as great as ever. They really did try to make some of these cars feel different, which is nice, and I can appreciate that. And on that note, you can actually swim in this game. If you go in the water, you don't die instantly. You can actually swim around. CJ can also climb stuff. I'd say the biggest change to San Andreas from the previous couple games is the level of customization that you have. This game is very customizable. In the old games, you could customize it the most, like what shirt your character's wearing. Here, you can customize everything about CJ, from his hair, how he looks, tattoos, and then they also bring in the role-playing elements. See, CJ has stats. He has stats in areas such as driving, firearms handling, stamina, lung capacity, and of course his hand-to-hand combat. The more you do of these actions, the better the stat gets. For instance, if you drive around a ton, your driving is going to get better. You're going to be able to handle cars better. If you run around a bunch, your stamina is going to get better. If you take CJ to the gym, he'll get fit and big. Or you can have him eat a ton of food and be lazy, and then he'll also get big, but not the kind of big that's muscly. You can even customize how CJ responds to pedestrians. It's not just CJ you can customize, as you can also customize your cars. There is way more vehicles here than any GTA game prior, and you can customize them pretty decently, like Midnight Club. And then there's all the gang activities. The gang stuff has been really expanded on from Vice City. You can actually take over territories, and you gotta protect your territory from other gangs. You don't have to do any of this, but it's fun. And then of course there's the main storyline to play through, and I think the main storyline's pretty great. It might be the longest of the GTA games. It has the most missions, and these missions are incredibly varied. They're all really different from each other, and so many of them are just memorable. And of course a ton of them have a decent amount of challenge, like the train. Some of my favorite missions of any video game are in San Andreas, like where you steal the jetpack or you do the heist on the casino. Like, I think all of these are just great. Sure, there's a bunch of missions here that are shit, I won't lie to you. A lot of the missions in San Fierro are not very good, especially anything involving drones. Like, these have just not ever been good in Rockstar games. But for the most part, it feels like almost legendary after legendary mission with so many good ones. And then the presentation was pretty good for the time as well. It does get really blurry on the PS2 and their frame rate isn't the best, but if you play like any other version other than the shitty remaster, it's fine. And the soundtrack, oh, it is so good. And the radio stations, oh my god, I could be here all day. I could really be here all day, I just love it. San Andreas also has the best cheats, easy. San Andreas is such a legendary game. It's probably my favorite PS2 game like of all time. Seriously, it's that good. But I don't think it's the best of the Grand Theft Auto games, but it's so close. Yes, I'm one of those people who thinks GTA 5 is the best of all the GTA games. Originally releasing in 2013, geez, almost 10 years ago, it seems that we still can't get away from Grand Theft Auto 5 because it's so great. It's not even like a game anymore. It feels like a dynasty. It's just taken over, and it's taken over not only Grand Theft Auto, but Rockstar Games as a whole. And really, at this point, what is there left to say about Grand Theft Auto 5 that hasn't already been said? Whether it is the amazing story, the great characters, the excellent writing, the really good attention to detail, or just the awesome single player, or now shit, the really expansive, extensive multiplayer that is GTA Online, Grand Theft Auto 5 has just become one of the very best games ever created, and it's clearly one of the most successful games ever made as well. It has it all, and I remember when this game came out, it had a stupid amount of hype behind it. Everybody at school was talking about, like everybody was talking about it, because when it came out, it just blew people's minds. It was the next Grand Theft Auto, and it was maybe the best campaign of them all. The game takes place in San Andreas, mostly Los Santos though, and it's about 3 different characters coming together. It's about retired bank robber Michael DeSanta, street gangster Franklin Clinton, and drug dealer / gun runner Trevor Phillips, and their attempts to commit heists while under pressure from a very corrupt government agency and some evil people. When it comes to the story, the characters, the writing, the world, all of it, it's just beyond fantastic. Like, it really is some of Rockstar Games' best. I know I've said that a bunch in this video, but it really is just fantastic when it comes to the characters and the writing and how they act. They have so much depth to them. They're all so interesting, and they all have really good backstories. They all go through really interesting arcs also. All of these characters are just really great, and it's not just the main 3 that are great, but the villains are really good, and then all the other side characters are just great. Like my man Lamar, he's awesome.
I see you at work. Oh, nigga, don't hate me because I'm beautiful, nigga. Maybe if you got rid of that old yee-yee ass haircut you got, you get some bitches on your dick. Oh, better yet, maybe Tanisha will call your dog ass if she ever stop fucking with that brain surgeon, the lawyer she fucking with, nigga. What?
No, this game has become very iconic in pop culture for a number of different reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is the characters and the story. Like, it's just fantastic.
Sweet Jesus.
The hell are you doing?
Oh, nothing.
Are you taking a dump?
Ah, why do you care, huh?
The fuck is wrong with you?
I got abandonment issue.
There's really not a bad character here. Like, they're just all really well done. The world is really well done. There's just so much detail to this world. Like, in old games, you know, there was a fair amount of detail to the open world, but here, like, Everything is incredibly detailed. You can go in so many buildings, and there's just so many little weird quirks and details, and there's just a ton to see here. It certainly has the biggest and most interactable open world that the series has ever seen, and it's one of the best open worlds in any video game ever, if not like just straight the best. Now, one of the key reasons this is my favorite GTA is because of how the game feels, how it handles, and how it controls. It is just basically perfect. It takes that overly realistic style of GTA 4 and kind of meshes it with San Andreas to get something in between that just feels excellent. It feels snappy, but it also feels fast and somewhat rooted in reality. It's not slow either. It just has a really great feel to it, whether you're running around or whether you're driving in the cars. It just all feels so awesome. Taking cover feels great. The gunfights are great. It is the best shooting that the series has ever seen, if not Rockstar Games in general. There's a ton, and I mean a ton of different weapons here, and there's plenty to take cover behind. You can take cover behind everything again. The handling of the vehicles is just superb. A lot of them feel really different, and no two vehicles feel exactly the same, and it's all just really good. It's like they took the excellent driving of Midnight Club and put it in here. Speaking of taking elements from their other games, every character has a special ability. So Michael has slow-mo, where it's like Max Payne. Trevor has rage mode, where it's just a rage mode, I guess. And then Franklin has slow-mo that is just straight ripped from Midnight Club, so you know Franklin's is my favorite because I love me some Midnight Club, but I really did like all the abilities, and I really loved how engaging this game was. Its open world is fantastic, and there's a ton of side stuff. And the campaign, the main missions anyway, is just legendary. They're almost all really good, like really, really good. A lot of them are easily the best missions that the GTA series has ever seen. There's only like a couple, maybe a handful at most, of missions that aren't very good. And even at their worst, I think they're just like okay. Seriously, like all the missions are really well thought out, and they're all really good. Some of the set pieces are really great too. Some of the best set pieces the series has ever seen. I know some people don't like that it's a lot more restrictive and linear than older GTA games, but I mean, it does create a more cinematic experience. But yeah, it is very linear. I can say it's a stark contrast to the actual game where it's so open, and then you have these really linear missions. Either way, it's still really great. And then the presentation is just fantastic. It looked great 10 freaking years ago, and it still looks great nowadays. The radio stations are all great. I don't know if I love it as much as San Andreas or Vice City, but it's still really great also. There's a lot of variety. Pretty much what anyone's looking for in music is here when it comes to the stations. They're all really good. And then there's GTA Online. Now, GTA Online, we'd be here all day if I talked about it, and its microtransactions, and its, yeah. Look, I never really got into GTA Online. They deleted my character one too many times with their server issues. I think it's pretty cool how extensive there is to it. I know a lot of people are really sick of it, myself included, but hey, it's there, it's a bonus. I wasn't really including it too much here. I just love the campaign of GTA 5. I think it's amazing, but the online is a little bonus there. Hopefully Rockstar can finally stop fucking around with GTA Online and give us GTA 6. And that's how this video is going to end. Where's GTA 6? Please bring us GTA 6. The Grand Theft Auto games, I love almost all of these games. They're all pretty great. Of course, you should check out most of them. If you made it to this part of the video, comment bricks as in what you used to build the house. I really appreciate you making it to this part. That means you listen to me, so thank you so much. It means the world to me. Check out my movie, The Shark Scale Finale. I hope everyone has a great day. Request something you want